Do you remember using a pencil to rewind a cassette tape? That strangely satisfying moment when the tape slowly spun back into place. But you also remember something else. The first time you downloaded an MP3. The first time you logged onto the internet and heard that strange dial-up sound echo through your house. Which means you remember two completely different versions of the world. One where information moved slowly, and another where everything became instant. If you were born between 1977 and 1985, you belong to a small and unusual generation, a group that grew up in the last years of the analog world, but stepped into adulthood at the exact moment the digital world exploded, and that experience changed how you see life in ways most people never realize. In 2014, writer Sarah Stankorb introduced a name for this micro-generation: Zennials. People who don't quite feel like Generation X, but also don't fully identify with millennials. They exist somewhere in the middle. Many people also call this group the Oregon Trail generation, because millions of kids in the late 80s and early 90s remember sitting in school computer labs playing the game, the Oregon Trail. A simple pixelated game about navigating an uncertain frontier, crossing rivers, managing limited supplies, trying to survive unpredictable obstacles. Looking back now, the metaphor feels strangely accurate, because growing up during this time meant constantly navigating change, new technology, new expectations, a world that seemed to update itself every few years. And people who experienced this transition developed something unusual: an ability to adapt quickly. To really understand this generation, you have to remember what childhood looked like before the internet became part of everyday life. If you wanted to talk to your friends, you called their house phone, and sometimes their parents answered first. If you wanted to meet someone after school, you agreed on a place, and then you waited, sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes for an hour. Because there was no way to send a quick message saying, "Hey, I'm running late." But something else about that world was even more important. Your mistakes didn't last forever. If you said something embarrassing at school, it disappeared. If you wore something strange or made a bad haircut decision, there was no permanent photo record, no screenshots, no social media archives. The awkward moments of adolescence simply faded with time. Psychologically, this gave people something rare today: the freedom to reinvent themselves, because their past wasn't permanently documented. Their identity could evolve naturally as they grew. For many younger generations, growing up now means something very different. Their entire adolescence is recorded online. But for this generation, memories lived mostly inside people's minds, and memories fade. Then, something extraordinary happened. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, the world transformed faster than almost any generation had experienced before. Dial-up internet appeared, email replaced letters, instant messaging replaced phone calls. And within a decade, smartphones replaced almost everything. Older generations often experienced the internet as something they had to learn later in life. Younger generations grew up with it as a normal part of childhood. But people born between 1977 and 1985 experienced something different. They remember the world before the internet, and they adapted to the digital world while their brains were still developing. Neuroscience shows that the prefrontal cortex continues maturing into our mid-20s. That part of the brain helps us adapt to new systems and complex environments, which means many people in this generation encountered the digital revolution during a crucial window of brain development. They were young enough to adapt quickly, but old enough to clearly remember what life looked like before everything changed. Very few generations in human history have had to update their mental model of the world that dramatically. Technology wasn't the only transformation happening during this time. The economic landscape was also shifting in unpredictable ways. Many people in this generation were entering adulthood just as the dot-com bubble collapsed. The excitement surrounding early internet companies suddenly vanished. Jobs disappeared. Entire industries reshaped themselves. And just when things started to stabilize, another shock arrived: the global financial crisis. Economists call the long-term psychological effect of these experiences the scarring effect. When people encounter economic instability early in adulthood, it permanently influences their relationship with money and risk. They tend to become more cautious, more likely to save, more likely to keep emergency plans in place, because their early experiences taught them that stability can disappear quickly. This is why many people from this generation quietly carry habits like emergency savings, backup career plans, a constant awareness that systems can suddenly change. It isn't pessimism, it's learned resilience. Now, years later, this unusual life experience has created a subtle role in many workplaces. People from this generation often become the bridge between two different mindsets. They understand older managers who value hierarchy, structure, and stability. But they also understand younger employees who value flexibility, speed, and independence. So they naturally become translators between these worlds, explaining perspectives, reducing conflict, helping teams understand each other. Psychologists refer to this invisible effort as emotional labor, a concept introduced by sociologist Arlie Russell Hochschild. Emotional labor is the work of managing feelings and relationships so social systems continue functioning smoothly. The strange part is that people performing this role often don't realize how much energy it takes. They simply feel exhausted at the end of the day. Not because of the workload, but because they spent hours navigating human differences. Most people grow up inside one version of the world. But if you were born between 1977 and 1985, you witnessed one of the biggest cultural transitions in modern history. You lived through the shift from analog life to digital civilization. You learned how to adapt when systems suddenly evolve, and that experience leaves a mark. Because people who have already survived massive change often become the most prepared for whatever comes next. I'm Garlic Man. If this story sounds familiar, leave your birth year in the comments. And subscribe if you want to explore more hidden psychology behind how our experiences quietly shape who we become.